Rutger Hauer is a big and powerful name in so-so movies. He has had some good roles in some good movies, but most of his movies were not that great. Today we look at a movie he was in that portrays being an 80s movie despite being made in 1996. Let's take a look at Omega Doom. I'm Ollamh, and welcome to Geek Corner Review. So we start off with a poem by Dylan Thomas by the title, "And Death Shall Have No Dominion," and then some very 80s style production logos. And then back to narration. Apparently there was a great war using robots, and this really awesome killer robot gets shot.
The bullet struck Doom in his program.
Wait, he gets shot directly in his programs? Isn't a program just information written and stored on a part of a computer? So it would be fairer to say that he was shot in the hard drive? But we get some really nice, confused, and possibly drugged Rutger Hauer faces, so I'll give it a pass. Though that is the only real emotion and expression we see on his face for the entire movie. It really starts looking like the Terminator, starting off with a war we never see, and then bones. Lots and lots of bones. And that is how you can tell a quality apocalypse movie, boys and girls, by the number of bones behind the opening credits.
Then a new threat arose. The robots discovered a few humans had survived and were intent on re-entering the world.
Aw, you mean humanity wasn't completely wiped out? Nothing spoils a good apocalypse like the remains of humanity. Now, I'm not sure where Omega Doom is supposed to be from, or where he is, but he certainly has a Russian look to him. And do robots even feel the cold? Is a heavy coat and fur hat really required for a mechanical being? Omega comes across a band of robots, not quite as human looking, so we know they are the bad guys. They appear to be playing a bit of kickball with a robot head. And in case you couldn't tell they were robots by the introduction's dialogue, we get some very nice whirring sound effects when they move. Come to find out, the area is occupied by two rival gangs, the ROMs and the Droids. We find out they hate each other thanks to a bit of exposition from the head. I have to wonder, can the ROMs actually learn anything? I mean, ROM means read-only memory, so they can't enter new information. The head is a teacher bot who has been decapitated for a year, and one wonders what he's been doing with his nights. But thankfully, Omega happens to find him right next to a body that he can join up with. This irritates one of the gangs, since they think of him as nothing but a soccer ball.
Well, friend.
There's nothing like a teacher droid for exposition. But let's cut to the basics. Both gangs showed up at the same time, wanting to find a stockpile of guns that are buried around somewhere in the area. I'm not quite sure why, but in the last days of the war, the humans, with infinite wisdom, decided to bury their only weapons. Omega decides he's going to stick around and wanders into the neutral zone of the watering hole. It seems that even the friendly bartender doesn't want him around, so he has no other option but to hang around and cause problems. He casually sits around while listening to the head being decapitated by the head of the droid gang again, even ignoring the pleas while the head is shown off and then carried away. So in an almost Western-style plot of intrigue, Omega goes to visit the other gang, the ROMs. While the ROMs look more normal, though maybe a bit like the precursor to Trinity, their speech is heavily modulated.
Not so far, you don't.
Omega shows them a bullet and says he knows where the rest of the guns are hidden, offering to join forces with the ROMs if they help him get the guns. We find out that Omega is a hybrid 5.5, which the ROMs claim are very inferior and that they've killed lots of his kind before. They want a gun as proof that he knows what he's talking about. But as Omega leaves, he sees Marco, the head of the droids, harassing the bartender and almost smashing her snow globe. Stepping in and irritating Marco yet again, he tries to talk to the droid and convince him to give up violence. Finally, about a third of the way into the movie, we see our first bit of action. In another very Western style, Marco and Omega have a draw. Only because there are no guns available, they draw and throw knives. It wouldn't be fair to name the movie after a character that dies this early, so Marco goes down. The head takes his time to gloat at the dead Marco and lets Omega know that he thinks he should have made Marco suffer. But Omega points out that really isn't his style, and he was really making a point. The second in command of the droids, Zeke, tries to convince Omega that they should join forces. It seems that everyone wants Doom on their side. We find out that they are worried about Blackheart, the leader of the ROMs. So Zeke agrees to help Omega get the guns, agreeing to a 50-50 split, but Omega points out that they can't go out and get them in broad daylight. Omega starts moving his plan into action as he decides to lure out a ROM to the spot where the guns are, and then work with a droid to take them out. In a mid-action break, Omega has a talk with the bartender, discussing the snow globe and things of beauty. He mentions that he saw a bird the other day and thinks it's a sign of hope. The bartender decides that it might be time to take out and ready a gun, which she has stashed away in the wall, showing that she is better equipped than either of the gangs. In the start of the second act, we find Omega giving the same offer to the ROMs as he gave to the droids, offering to help a ROM take out the droid instead. Agreeing with the plan, Omega leads the ROM out, with Zeke herself following behind. Only her plan is to take out both the ROM and Omega. And while they are gone, the rest of the droids will take the ROMs with a sneak attack while they're waiting for their guns. The ROMs, it seems, had the same idea, and while Omega is out of town, they attack the droids. Ironface, the ROM sent with Omega, decides that it's all just a trick and she needs to take out Omega once they are out in the wasteland. But she greatly underestimates Doom, who manages to catch her blade and throw it back to her. Sadly, she isn't familiar with the game of Frisbee and completely fails her catch. Zeke shows up with a cliched slow clap. She obviously isn't as cooperative as she led Omega to believe. So we see yet another duel with Omega coming out on top, in case you were worried. He leaves her to die slowly by her own wish, and returns to town just in time to see the other ROMs coming out to the street. Now, this confuses me. We've seen the bartender pour water before, and it always comes out green. But we can see the water filtering in her machinery, and it's pure and clear. So why the hell is everything coming out green? Also, how the hell did the ROMs manage to sneak up on the droids? With their heavy footsteps, they should have been heard a mile off. Omega and Blackheart have a face-off in the bar, showing their different attitudes. Blackheart wants to kill the bartender, thinking her weak and useless. Omega tries to bargain for the bartender's life. Instead, Blackheart throws the droid at him and jumps him with the other ROM still alive. And again, true to Western style, Omega is damaged in this fight, being stabbed and having the tip of the blade broken off inside him in almost a Tolkien fashion. And in typical evil fashion, they decide not to just kill the hero, but instead probe his memory, trying to find out just who this stranger is. The bartender decides to help out even though her gun is empty, She is planning to use it to trick Blackheart into believing she knows where the treasure is, while the head gets Omega Doom out. Meanwhile, Blackheart takes a trip down Omega's personal memory lane. Apparently, the shot to the head gave Omega the ability to decide good from bad and tell who should live and who should die. Also, we get a bit of divine imagery. Omega should have died, but wound up coming back to help those in need. Apparently, the ROMs are stupid enough to try firing a gun before checking if there are any bullets in it, and have no idea about the different bullet designs and calibers. Blackheart actually gets frustrated as she tries to shove a bullet far too big into a simple revolver. But that doesn't matter. They follow the bartender to find the stash, to the point of ignoring Omega as useless. Apparently, Omega Doom has confirmed Blackheart's greatest fears. There are still humans out there, and they are coming. This is why she needs to get the guns to fend off the last human settlement. Instead of just killing the bartender when she refuses to dig, Blackheart starts to dig while the other ROM discusses whether she likes killing or not. This, of course, gives the head enough time to bring Omega back around, knocking out one of the ROMs and catching the blade Blackheart throws at him. In the final standoff, Omega and Blackheart have a bit of a verbal battle, continuing to establish the difference between their ideas. Because, of course, we haven't had enough of that yet. We have an actual sword and knife fight that, honestly, is a mixture of close-ups and silhouettes. I may be a bit old-fashioned, but I like actual action in my action movies. Eventually, Omega wins. Who would have thought? Good wins over evil. He cuts the head off of Blackheart, giving her body to the head, allowing him to move around normally again. The head, the bartender, and the remaining ROM decide to team up and go out to join Omega. Looking up into the sky, they see a bird, the clear sign of hope. The team decides to rebuild the town for when the humans make it. You see, Omega Doom knows that the humans do still exist, but they are too busy rebuilding their world to come hunting down the robots. And in case there wasn't enough heavy imagery, the bartender remembers the lyrics to the music for her snow globe, Joy to the World.
Joy to the world, the Lord has come.
On his way out, he runs into Zeke, and she asks him to turn her head so that she can see the sunset. And what the hell? Omega not only smokes, but had a lighter in his thumb. That could have come in handy several times earlier.
A hybrid up north.
She also mentions that there is another hybrid out there, up north, that is a real killer and worse than Omega.
Worse than you.
Because another trope of this time was the mandatory setting up of a sequel. Omega walks off and somehow manages to fade away in just a few steps. Not quite sure if that's more angel imagery or they just had a very small soundstage for this part. Finally, we end up with more narration, talking about how Omega is different from other machines and the exact words from the start of the movie. And trust me, they don't make any more sense than they did at the beginning. As stated in the intro, this is a movie made in 1996, but is very much an 80s movie. From starring Rutger Hauer to the camera tricks to avoid heavily choreographed fight scenes. Remember, this came out the same year as Independence Day, Twister, From Dusk Till Dawn, and Mission Impossible. So the technology and ability to make action-packed, creepy movies was obviously around. It seems to be a mediocre story in a much longer and more interesting tale. Not great, but not awful. The techniques and story were, again, mediocre. Ultimately, it feels like this movie was trying to be a lot of things, but with its 1 hour and 24-minute runtime, it never really achieves any of them. It has the feeling and pacing of an old spaghetti western. Man walks into town, two rival bandit gangs are causing trouble looking for a treasure, and he pits both of them against one another to take them both out. But it also has the feel of a heavenly intervention movie, with the song Joy Around the World being included, the reference to Omega as guardian angel, and a winged creature showing signs of hope. I'm not sure if Omega Doom is supposed to be the robot without a name, or Robo-Jesus, or maybe just a metallic angel. I would have to say this is a good popcorn movie. If you are looking for deep meaning, a lot of action, or something like that, this is not going to be something you want to watch. On the other hand, if you are looking for a stylized film, something that is entertaining while not very taxing on the mind, this movie would be right up your alley. So what do you think? Is this a movie you've seen before? If so, how would you rate it? If not, do you think it's one you might want to watch, or will you avoid it like the plague? Leave a comment down below and let us know. Also, you can find us on Twitter and talk to us about the review there. As always, thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for more from Ollamh Productions. Cheerio!
Yeah, this is... Tomorrow Corporation, you are evil, evil bastards.
Action movie starring Dolph Lundgren. The movie was based more on the original toy line idea than the cartoon series, so was darker and more violent